Good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Sarah Punt, and I'm the Director of Christian Education and Youth Ministry here at Salem. I welcome all of you to our sanctuary, and I also welcome those of you who are watching from afar. I know a few of them, and hopefully there are more of you. Our goal with this mental health exhibit and program is to reduce and eliminate the stigma surrounding mental illness. And we're doing this through raising awareness and understanding. And we also have a goal of connecting people in the community with organizations in the community who offer services to help people in need. Each week, on Sunday evenings, we've been focusing on different topic areas related to mental illness. And tonight, we are looking at two people who, in their own way, have responded to mental illness, either their own personal experience or an experience in their family. Before I get into introducing our speakers, I want to mention Family Diversity Projects. That is the organization that curates the photo and text exhibit we have on display in the library. And if you were not able to view it prior to the speaking this evening, we will be here for a while afterwards if you want to take a tour through it, or we have open hours throughout the week. Family Diversity Projects is dedicated to eliminating stigma, bullying, and prejudice, stereotypes relating to anything from immigration status, mental illness, racial diversity, LGBTQIA plus community, and so on. All of our programs here are free of charge. We are collecting donations to benefit Family Diversity Projects. They have 8 exhibits that tour the country and go to schools, churches, community buildings, all around to help educate the public to eliminate these stereotypes and prejudices. There is a QR code in your bulletin if you wish to make a contribution. There are also donation boxes in the foyer and near the exhibit in the library. In addition, I applied for a grant to help us host this exhibit and speaker series. And part of that grant is I need to be able to report back some measure of success. And I define success as attendance of people who come to view the exhibit and participate in the programs. We had you sign in when you came in, and that is what we will use to track who is here. Not names. If you want to leave your name, that's fine, but really just interested in who you are in terms of your age group and if you're a member here or just visiting from the community. Another measure that we put into place in the grant was, how are we going to measure if we end the stigma? So in the outside rows of the pews, there are index cards, and I would love it if you could take an index card and have it in your lap while the speakers are going. And I would like you to write down something that you learn throughout the presentation. A stigma for you that is busted, something new you'd never heard before, or a new way that you're thinking about mental illness as a result of the presentation. Then on your way out this evening, we have a bulletin board in the back that you can add your index card and help us track how we are ending the stigma. Throughout the evening, we will be talking about some sensitive topics. This program is for information purposes. We are not counselors or therapists and do not have professional background to help people struggling with mental illness. However, we encourage you, if something is distressing to you and you need to take a break, please feel free to step out and come back in. we want everyone to do what is right for themselves. And if you need some assistance tonight before you leave, please speak to me. And if I cannot help you, I will wait with you until we find somebody who can. So the exhibit that's on display is really a collection of stories. And it is through stories that we really challenge the barriers that come between us and people who are different from us. When you learn a story, you start to see the human and the person behind the story. And so tonight, two people with close ties to Salem are going to share their story. The first one is Conlon Bass. Conlon grew up here at Salem. I've known him since he was little. He started the Bandana Project on the UW campus when he was a student there. The Bandana Project is a suicide prevention and mental health awareness program. After graduating from the UW, Conlon received a Master of Public Health from Yale University. He now works for the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment as a health system specialist coordinating the Zero Suicide program. He is not able to be here in person tonight, and so he has created a video to share his vision and his passion for the project that he started years ago that I know is now on other college campuses. My daughter went to a different school, and her first week of school came across the Bandana Project, and she said, "Hey, I know about this." And our second speaker is Ellen Warsaw. She graduated with a degree in biology and education from Cornell University. She has worked in health, management, and education, and she is a proud wife and mother. Ellen is currently writing a memoir of her mental health journey. I will also add that Ellen is my big sister. And she's going to share with us this evening her journey through her mental health and mental illness challenges. So with that introduction, I am going to play the video of Conlon talking about his Bandana Project.
Hi everyone, my name is Conlon Bass, and I don't often find myself recording videos for presentations. I really wish I could be there in person, or at least over Zoom with you all, have this chat today. But I'll be celebrating a friend's wedding in the Boston area. So that's why I couldn't make it. I'll be sure to wave as I thought I was confident on my way from. But I want to say thank you for highlighting the Bandana Project first and foremost as part of Salem's Nothing Behind exhibit. I think it's a really cool initiative and showcase eliminating stigma around mental illness and mental health. And just wanted to say kudos for looking up that conversation. I am sitting here in my apartment in Denver, Colorado, and it's a beautiful sunny spring day. It's like 70 degrees sunny. I'm wearing shorts. I have my Zoom get up right and put a little more put together on top of it. I'm wearing slippers, of course. With the weather today and recording this for y'all, I was thinking of this quote from Glenn Close, who has started an organization called Bring Change to Mind, mental health advocate. And the quote is, "What mental health needs is more sunlight, more candor, and more unashamed conversation." And I think that really captures the spirit of why you have this exhibit, and honestly captures a lot of my attitude around mental health, illness, and suicide. I want to leave with the caveat that my experiences in this area are my own, and everybody has a different offered me. I myself identify as part of the LGBT plus community, but I'm not here really to talk about my sexual orientation or dating life. I think you can say that for different times, but more so that it really did make a difference for me. Growing up in a religious context that was affirming of who I was, I don't think that in church settings that's also common, and it really did make a difference in making me feel like I can live in my truth, be who I am, and feel supported by the church community that also reached me. So I want to say thank you for that experience, and it really does matter for mental health and everything else. I went to Philadelphia school and had some different experiences in high school that I think really brought me into the world of mental health, illness, and suicide. My freshman year of high school, I unfortunately lost my uncle's path to suicide, and it was devastating for our family. And in the grieving process and supporting one another, sharing that story and what had happened with other families and friends, it became clear quite quickly just how many folks had had similar experiences, either on the mental health and illness side of things, and had loved ones thinking about suicide, attempting, or tragically dying as well. And my senior year of high school, I lost one of my close friends to suicide as well. And I think I got a pretty deep appreciation of the stigma around mental illness and mental health after both of those experiences. And I carried an uncounting title with me every single day that I do the work that I do, which I'll talk about a little bit in a second. And my family and friends. Weird to start talking about things that are a little emotional when you're here with it. But I've had early experiences of loss early on in high school, and was sharing my experiences with friends, family, again that there were so many similarities in the stories that I was hearing, and I grew frustrated with this stigma and how much of a barrier it is for people feeling included and getting the support that they need. So I went to college really looking for ways to dismantle that and think about how we could better support people in our lives. And have that vision of the Day of Project, which I'm so grateful that you chose to include in this exhibit. It started with myself and other members of the NAMI, National Environmental Illness DOE Action Chapter. And the premise was really simple, was that anyone looking to get involved would tie the line green banner in their backpack. And that would mean that they would carry campus-specific resource cards with mental health information, what to do in a crisis, stuff like that. Really just trying to make a broad display of social support for folks and also get resources in the hands of people that need them. It was continuously surprising how engaged the UW-Madison campus was in the Big Data Project. Over the course of my undergrad years there, the program grew to include over 3,500 students. And walking on campus and seeing those line Big Data on backpacks every single day, it was a profound transformation of how supportive mental health and illness felt for me on that campus. The Big Data Project kept spreading after my time at UW-Madison, and we helped a couple other chapters get started. But it wasn't until grad school, when I was getting my degree in public health, that I came to see the Big Data Project as a broader tool for engagement and mental health awareness and advocacy, share some education, and help folks learn how to support one another. And through that process, with the help of some folks in my grad program, help from family and friends and others doing this work across the country, the Big Data Project became a national organization. It now has over 70 chapters, and I was able to pass the torch my degree onto an organization called SAFE, Suicide Awareness Voices of Education, and they have a whole suite of programs too many of us go through to have to be something that night. The whole point behind this exhibit. So again, it really means the world for you to have included BT in this. If you would like to be put in touch with the folks at SAVE about the programming, I'll make sure to share their contact information. I'm still involved in the Bayesian project, and I love to hear what's going on in communities with the program. But now I actually work for the Colorado Office of Suicide Prevention, where I've been learning more about how to make lives worth living at the community level to prevent death by suicide, maybe before a crisis, figuring out where we can support folks, make them feel more included, have more resources to handle what life throws. All those things that we know can make a difference well in advance of the suicidal crisis. So that's kind of where I'm approaching this chat today. I want to share some things I've learned through that job. And yeah, so I guess first, I would like to share some language around suicide that I found helpful for destigmatizing the experience. I think you'll notice me saying die by or die of suicide versus committed suicide, just because of the connotation around the word committed something, as if it's like a crime or and there are other examples too. For example, saying that someone has successfully completed a suicide, we can leave off that word successfully. It's not a success. What I'll often say is completed a suicide or had an incomplete attempt. Just taking whatever judgment was in that phrase out of it. And I know these are very common things, and it's just part of our vernacular, but just some shifts to consider to normalize. We also know how many folks are affected by mental illness and suicide in some way. And I was originally going to go through what those statistics look like, what that means for folks. But I think we are on common ground and we understand that so many people are experiencing these things. We really need to strip away that shame. One thing that I've found more and more true is that like by shame is something that is so often out of our control. And the advice I often give to folks is to give yourself the grace that you give a loved one. Talk to yourself and treat your mental health as if you were giving that love and support to someone you care about. I know it's so easy to rank ourselves and let that isolation seep in, but whenever you can, I encourage you to be gentle with yourself. I have also come to understand some of the true norms around suicide in my work, and that's that there is a whole cascade of events and factors before that suicidal crisis, before someone is considering or planning on taking their life. We know that 90% of folks who attempt suicide will not go on to die by suicide. So that statistic in and of itself shows that recovery and hope and resilience is the true norm. There are so many points where we could intervene and support someone in advance of that crisis. So that's kind of how my work stays engaging and powerful because I am so often surrounded by people sharing their experiences with mental illness or suicidal ideation, which really does wonders for creating a culture of sharing and support. And I think there's a lot of things that we can do to facilitate those conversations. We can learn how to share our story with others. We can learn some of the common risk factors and warning signs of suicide. I would direct anyone interested in learning more towards the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. If I was fancy, I'd put like a little banner across the bottom of the screen. But their website is just AFSP.org, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And they have a ton of information about risk factors and warning signs that can be really helpful for knowing how to identify if someone in your life is struggling, as well as how to address that conversation. As individuals, I think the most important thing we can do is educate ourselves in that way and become more comfortable having these conversations with if someone is considering, you directly asking if they're thinking about suicide is the best way to figure out how to get them the help and support that they need. And though I understand the barriers to asking that question directly, and using the word suicide can be really difficult, it is so important to speak specifically and really understand where someone's at so they can get the help that they need. So as individuals, I think those are some of my pro tips that I've learned. And as communities, the work of suicide prevention and mental health promotion looks a little different than it did a couple of years ago. I think we are having a better understanding that supporting people's basic economic, food security, housing needs goes a long way to making them feel like their life is protected and safe. I think there's tremendous capacity for connectedness and inclusion efforts. Trying to figure out what we can do to reach folks who might not otherwise be accessing support or getting connected to their neighbor who may be able to have this conversation with them. The Big Data Project is an awesome tool for breaking down that barrier, but there are other examples, even if it's just in a conversation, sprinkling in some comments about some of the more personal habits, like not really shared. Again, touching on that inclusion piece, as a religious community, I think it's so important to be affirming and inclusive. We know, especially among LGBT plus and BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, people of color. For those groups of youth, the rates of mental illness and suicide are concerning. That being said, we know what works to better support those folks in our communities. Having them be able to receive services that are responsive to their experiences and identities matters a lot. That they have safe spaces that provide this safe. I remember seeing affirming place at Salem and having that be a quiet symbol of support for me. It really does make a difference. And just want to again say kudos and thank you for that practice at Salem and just opening up this conversation. I think as an organization in any community, that's really what you can do, and look to support people's basic needs and find more ways to connect with one another. Again, I just wanted to say that I think that Salem having this exhibit is an awesome step towards making this conversation, a needed conversation happen. And I want to say thank you for opening up this space and this vulnerability, because it is vulnerable. It is important to recognize just how many of us have mental illnesses and or struggle with our mental health, or even think about suicide. We don't talk about it, but it's very common. And I think opening up conversations where we can talk about it, again, is the best way to get help and support when it's needed most. So when I think the phrase nothing to hide, I want to end with that same quote I started with from Post. I think it really captures this spirit and what I will definitely carry with me for the rest of this week, the rest of the time I'm doing this work, and just as a person. And I hope that you are interested in doing the same. And that's what mental health needs: more sunlight, more candor, and more understanding conversation. Thank you again for having me speak and for featuring the Data Project. I really wish I could be there in person. But I hope that the rest of this evening and this exhibit goes well. And yeah, please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or comments or would just like to chat afterwards. But yeah, thank you all.
Thank you, Conlon. I wish you were here too. I think I can speak for all of us when I say we are proud of the work that Conlon is doing, and he's very inspirational and helpful. So I'm gonna just say that we need like a 1-minute pause while we switch out our technology before Ellen takes the floor. And so cue the elevator music.
John, how is that on sound? Good. Okay. You ready? Okay. So as Sarah said, oh, as Sarah continues to say, ready? Okay. So as Sarah said, I'm Ellen, am her sister. It's no longer fun to say that I'm her big sister or her older sister, but we'll just leave that. I'm here to talk with you tonight about how I live with MDDRS, order, recurrent, severe. The name kind of describes itself. Situational factor. It also comes back. Right now, I'm in remission. However, for a long time, my depression was more like a chronic disease. I would cycle between short periods when my depression was mild to moderate, kind of a foundation under. And I was actively suicidal for a long stretch of time. I'm going to elaborate on that in a bit. But to understand my journey with depression, I think you have to understand a little bit about who I was before that journey began. When I was young, I was an early reader, a good student, and academics was the world I knew. I went to a high school where the honors were filled with other students like me. Being a student was what I excelled at. It's just, it was. I wasn't an athlete. I wasn't an artist. I can barely draw a stick figure. And related to. Is it on? Are we hearing that? Yeah.
Testing.
Okay. Okay. Please, raise a hand or give me a sign if I'm getting the microphone too far away or too close. So I was starting to talk about my personal background before I was depressed. And I was saying I'm not, and I wasn't, a great athlete. I wasn't an artist. I wasn't a fabulous musician. But I was smart, and I was an accomplished student. That was my thing. As an adult, I continued to be an avid reader, and I devoured books at a rate of about 4 or 5 a month. I loved learning about new things, and I probably annoyed my family with routine comments about information I gathered along the way. Did you know that? I read something about. I liked to do word and logic puzzles. I was a dedicated volunteer. I enjoyed keeping up with the evolving world of personal computers and the new internet. But I'm dating myself again, so I'm just going to move on. Professionally, I managed a physical therapy practice and did all of their billing. I was and am also a wife and mother. And those are both roles that I love above all else. And I was deeply grieved when I couldn't prioritize them over my disease and my journey. But all of that was before my depression, before the period of time that separated my life into 2 distinct parts. I refer to them as Old Ellen and Ellen version 2.0. Except the new update, in several ways that I will talk about, has not been an improvement, and it features some things I would rather live without. Now, before I share any more details about depression and my treatments, I want to emphasize the message that Sarah shared earlier. I'm not a doctor or any kind of therapist. I don't have any professional credentials. I speak only from my personal experience and the information I've gathered during my journey with depression. So just as a little background, there are a few different types of depression, but they all involve a chemical imbalance in our brains. Some people develop situational depression. It's brought on by an experience like a death, a divorce, abuse, or maybe the loss of a job. Others, like me, develop depression without that type of external cause. It just happens. But depression is depression, and it always results from that chemical imbalance in the brain. Doctors know of ways to mitigate depression, but there's no good way to predict it or prevent it, and there's currently no magic cure. Describing depression sometimes sounds like the feelings or issues that many people encounter in their daily lives. Who hasn't had a day when they feel challenged just to pull themselves out of bed, or experience something that made them feel like they would be angry or sad forever? Many people have an occasional stretch of insomnia or a period where they aren't interested in being as social as usual, not to mention feeling rather down during the low light months of winter. Though somewhat familiar to those milder, normal feelings for many, the symptoms of depression are debilitating and disrupt normal life for an extended period of time. Depression is generally defined as having 5 or more of the symptoms you see on the screen. One of those 5 must be one of the first 2 symptoms on that list: loss of interest or pleasure in almost all activities, particularly things that once brought you pleasure, or a depressed mood, feeling low and sad. The symptoms must occur every day, nearly all day, for longer than 2 weeks. And that's kind of where we see the separation between normal ups and downs and a diagnosis for depression. So just to go through those other symptoms for somebody who may not be able to read the list, they also include crying and feeling tearful, feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, or emptiness, feeling irritable, frustrated, or intolerant of others, having angry outbursts, even over small things, experiencing fatigue and loss of energy, so that even small tasks take extra effort. Sleep abnormalities at both extremes, and changes in eating habits or appetite also often to the extremes. Feeling anxious, agitated, or restless, slowed thinking, speaking, or body movements, feelings of worthlessness, low self-esteem, and guilt, having a lack of motivation, having difficulty thinking, concentrating, remembering, and even making decisions. An inability to carry out activities of daily living. Those are the things we do every day: showering and getting dressed, getting some groceries or making dinner. And increasing thoughts of self-harm, death, or suicide. I had them all. And I had dealt with them for years before seeing my therapist for the first time, never mind starting antidepressant medication. My journey with severe, debilitating depression began sometime around 2007, about 7 years before I sought help. For the first few years, my depression was kind of in the background. I didn't even realize I was depressed. I just knew I wasn't functioning as well as I used to. I wasn't motivated to do more, to reach the standards I usually held myself to. And I wasn't as happy and engaged as I used to be. I didn't think that these things were even linked together. In part, I think I might have assumed that they were just part of the natural aspects of aging, or my life transitioning as our kids went off to college and left home. I think depression can start that way for many people. It's kind of insidious. The American poet Carl Sandburg wrote a line that reads, "The fog comes on little cat feet." I feel like that kind of describes the onset of my depression pretty well. Over that initial period of time, I gradually gave up my leadership roles as a volunteer. Then I stopped being involved in those activities at all. I don't remember the change, but my son told me I even stopped cooking dinner before he graduated from high school in 2012. My depression had taken a pretty strong hold by 2014. Enter my therapist that February. She literally saved my life, more than once. But we're going to get to that. By the time I sought help, I had already withdrawn from my family and friends, pushing them farther and farther away. I was struggling to get to work. I was struggling to get out of bed. I was struggling to make myself shower and get dressed, even in yoga pants. I wasn't enjoying or even engaging in some of my favorite activities. I wasn't going to the zoo or attending concerts or the theater. I didn't open my books or turn on music. I used to love to turn on music to sing along or just listen, but not then. As time moved on over the next year, I couldn't even drag myself to holiday celebrations with extended family. In the end, I also had to quit the job, which I had formerly enjoyed, and at which I think I did a fairly good job. I felt hopeless about ever feeling better, and I couldn't bear the thought of enduring my pain or the darkness much longer. I did a lot of what is called masking. Some of you might recall a recent TV commercial for an antidepressant. The woman who is the patient in the ad holds up a stick with an orange disc. The disc has a smiling face on it, implying that the patient tried to hide her distress. That's masking. Despite the severity of my depression, most people in my life didn't know that I was depressed at all, and even those close to me had no idea how severe it was. I think that was the subconscious reason I did it. It wasn't something I created or planned. I just did it. It hid my weakness, my sadness, my dysfunction, my guilt, my shame. In early 2014, my masking initially prevented my new therapist from seeing just how deep my depression was. She had never known me when I was healthy, and I, without even trying, masked. So this new person in my life wouldn't know how weak or desperate I felt, even though I was seeking her help. Apparently, I was quite good at this thing that I didn't know I was doing. But my therapist is more than quite good at her job. It wasn't long before she saw how significant my depression had become. Soon after I started working with her, my therapist connected me with a psychiatrist who specialized in pharmacology, or finding the best ways to treat mental illness with medication. He and I tried every class of antidepressants, different drugs within each class, and numerous combinations of different medications. Each of those medications takes time to build up in your system to get to a therapeutic level. The prescription process took us several years to find anything that helped me. Eventually, we found a cocktail of medications that work in concert with each other. I still take those meds now, every day, and I will take them for the rest of my life. Antidepressant medication and therapy are probably the two most common interventions for depression. This week's focus in Nothing to Hide focuses on mental illness as people respond to their journey with mental illness. My initial responses were the physical and behavioral symptoms I just described. As I began to withdraw, distance, and drop out, I was masking to hide what was going on with me. And I think the stigma of mental illness played a part in that. But I had one other absolutely vital response to my developing depression. In my desperation, I sought help. Only a few months after I started working with my therapist and psychiatrist, I was hospitalized for the first time because they and my husband knew that I was becoming a risk to myself. I had moved from thinking that ending my life might be the only way to end my suffering to making plans to do exactly that. I believed that ending my life was the only thing that I could do. Over the next 3 years, I was hospitalized 4 times, each time for my own safety. My inpatient stays lasted anywhere between a week and 2 months. I'd like to read you a part of something I wrote that illustrates my feelings at that time. As Sarah mentioned earlier, we want everyone to take care of themselves tonight and do what feels comfortable for them. I will not be discussing anything graphic, but this reading is very dark. And then I'm going to talk a bit about suicide in a general way. If you feel like you need to step out, take a break at any time, please feel free to do that. I will return if you'd like to in a while, and I won't be offended. Black. Gray to start out. Variants of gray, really. Some, the uninitiated, might expect it would be blue. Blue for the blues. But blue requires light. And that was absent. So it was gray, like thunderheads, pushing in and darkening the sky. Being tired is usually first to accompany the gray. Not from exertion, nor lack of sleep. I just needed to cocoon in my bed. I was grumpy and angered easily. Tears came with no prompting, and sometimes no reason. Disinterest in everything became standard. I had neither the energy nor the ability to think clearly. Alone was not lonely. It brought needed isolation. Others close to me can tell when that happens. They see it in my eyes, my posture. They hear it in my voice and lack of words. Everything I say or do slows down. I'm sometimes reluctant to admit it. I don't want it to be true. I can't imagine negotiating my way through it yet again. Then comes the change to increased darkness, and that I always recognize. Black. Torturous black. Black as tar or unburned coal. I become encased entirely in black, like a corpse in a coffin. No exit exists. Black also fills me inside. It occupies all the space. It weighs me down like a cement foundation. Sometimes it's too solid to move. Sometimes too crushing to breathe. Darkness also fills the hole. Yes, there is a hole. It contains a strong black vortex. For a long time, the hole is only up ahead, at the end of my painful path. As I see the hole get closer, the weight I bear grows heavier. The hole I see then is enormous. The edges are steep and the bottom invisible. The vortex is pulling everything in. It is my destination, but it will not be a release. I've been burdened for a long time by the heavy darkness I carry, the darkness that fills me. Months and months, even years. To the desperate, it feels like forever. Until it is not only on and in, but everywhere, surrounding me soundlessly. when I'm just a few steps from that precipice, I am neither strong enough nor capable enough to tackle the challenge of survival? What if I'm not prepared enough and I enter into the battle in that hole only to find I cannot withstand the attack? If I'm too wounded before it begins, no one knows the thought I have given, nor the secrets I managed to keep. Deeper, heavier, harder to bear, unendurable at times. I have a desperate need to escape in any conceivable way. The darkness overtakes me. All I see now is the vortex inside the dreaded hole before me. I could never withstand the continued pain inside. So without fanfare or sorrow, without regret, I choose the alternative. Often people cannot understand someone being suicidal. Don't they have a good life to look forward to? Don't they know the pain will ease at some point? Don't they have loved ones that will be hurt by their actions? What about the graduations, the weddings, the babies, retirement? What about the college days ahead? Their new partner, the house they just bought, or the new job they were excited about? What if I can't survive another moment like this, is the question I was asking. I cannot speak for others who have struggled with suicidal ideation, plans, active attempts, or even completion. For me, ending my life didn't involve not caring about or feeling cared for by my family and friends, those who might be hurt by my actions. It wasn't because I didn't have the right ingredients in my life or wasn't being successful at some goal. It didn't have anything to do with forgetting about the future events that I would normally look forward to. I couldn't even think about those things or even those people during the depths of my depression, during that blackness, pulling me into the place where I thought it would intensify and continue forever. My psychiatrist once gave me a description of why depressed people can become so hopeless and sometimes suicidal. It also explains part of why I have little memory about most of that time when I was depressed. Now, please remember, I'm not a medical professional. This is just my interpretation of what was said to me. Apparently, the brain can only remember or recall memories from a time when it is in a similar state to the one it was in when the subject of the memory occurred. So for example, if a student takes Adderall to help them study, prescribed or not, they will need to take that Adderall again when they take their test in order for that studying to have a maximum effect. Without it, a lot of what they learned while taking Adderall will not be as easily accessible to them during the test. The information is in their brain, but if they aren't in the same altered state, they can't remember it as easily. Likewise, someone experiencing depression primarily remembers feelings from other times they were depressed. This leads to the patient feeling like they've always been depressed. They aren't remembering the positive feelings from a period when they weren't depressed. That patient can feel hopeless since they have little to no evidence that life can ever feel differently. That hopelessness can lead to suicidal ideation or thoughts, suicidal planning, and actuation, or carrying out that plan. Ending my life was the only way I thought I could be freed from the pain and turmoil that had taken over my life and refused to let go. By the time I was formulating my first plans to end my life, I'd been struggling with an intensifying, debilitating depression for almost 7 years. It wasn't that I didn't want to be here for events in the future. It was that I couldn't bear thinking about getting through the next moment. I had been hanging on by a thread for a very long time. I was hopeless. The hospitalizations I mentioned occurred because I was moving from suicidal ideation to suicidal planning, and in some of those situations, suicidal attempts. The third of my 4 hospitalizations was the most distinct from the others. By that time, I was seeing my therapist 5 days a week. She knew I was in trouble and hoped that more contact would provide additional time in which to help me and also keep me connected as much as possible. She had become a strong lifeline for me by then, and I was floundering so desperately, it was all I could do to get myself to her office each day. After my session one afternoon, my therapist began calling me every hour, sensing that I was in danger. At the end of each call, she made a contract with me about our next call. I answered that last one only because I thought if I talked to her, she would think I was okay and leave me alone. Leave me with the time that I needed. Everything was already in place to save myself from the darkness. We were on the phone when I became unresponsive. Emergency responders intervened in time to save my life. The doctors who treated me agreed that without that intervention, I would have died. A few days later, when I became aware enough to realize I was alive, I was really angry. Angry because I had been interrupted. Being interrupted meant I had failed, and my unbearable journey was continuing. Trying to end my life was one of the ways I responded to my mental health journey. We often refer to hospitalization in a passive way. I was hospitalized. It happened to me. It sounds like being incarcerated against your will. That was almost true for me. The only thing I'd been capable of at those times was trying to end my suffering. I couldn't manage to fight the people who were trying to help me. At all of my admissions, I agreed, albeit reluctantly, to sign myself in. By signing myself in, legally, I could sign myself out. But I was so dysfunctional, I couldn't fight when I was discouraged from doing so. You might wonder why someone with depression, like me, would be reluctant to go to a hospital and get helped. After my first hospital stay, I had lost hope that being admitted would provide a path out of the unbearable place in which I was stuck. Being hospitalized is not a magic cure for depression. It is intended first and foremost to protect you from yourself, and then to try to help you return to a state of better mental well-being. For safety, each time I was checked in, I had to give up everything I had with me, any possession I had at hand, all my clothes, my wedding ring, everything. I spoke earlier about not remembering much from during my depression. This is something I wrote about some of the memories I do have from my hospital stay that occurred after my nearly successful suicide attempt. The S. I remember the S. I was curled into an S, facing the plain white cinder block wall. I suspect the dreaded blue hospital gown probably exposed my back and underwear, but I didn't care. I doubt I even thought about it. I didn't change positions. That would have required awareness of my body and energy to move. Neither of those things were present. That is the crux of my story. Me, lying on the bed, in the shape of an S. I was not allowed to wear my own clothes, except a pair of underwear. No bra, no shirts or shoes, no pants, no pajamas at night. Only hospital tread socks and those tangly gowns. At least I was in fashion for one time in my life. I was dressed just like many of the other patients were. However, I didn't notice that then either. I also didn't care about it. I only cared about my S. Actually, that's probably an overstatement. I didn't care about the S either. I just happened to lie that way and then didn't move. I slept a lot facing the wall, oblivious to the rest of my surroundings. When I was awake, I either kept my eyes closed or simply stared at the wall. I didn't think about anything. I didn't know if I was hot or cold, sad, tired, angry. If I'd known any of those things, I wouldn't cared about those either. I think the S was the best way I could block out the world then. My face just inches from the wall meant no other stimuli could get in. When I was interrupted for some reason to check my blood sugar or my blood pressure, take medications, or go to the bathroom, I noticed a woman who sat at my open doorway all the time. The woman wore scrubs in unfamiliar colors, black pants, and a deep red top. At the time, I didn't know who she was, only who she wasn't. She wasn't an RN in navy blue scrubs or a tech in olive green. A hospital uniform directory that I saw later at the nurses' station identified her as a sitter, like a babysitter. A very blunt title, sitter. Accurate and to the point, though. I understood then who she is, who she was. But I didn't understand until I saw the directory what she did. And eventually, I would understand why. Her job was to watch me constantly. She was on the locked ward in my open doorway to prevent me from finishing what I had started. For the same reason, the door to my room always remained open. There were no closed doors in my life just then, except emotionally. It seems every door within me was closed at the time, but there wasn't one closed as you entered my room or any other physical space I occupied. Even when I was forced to put on a clean gown, I could step back out of view from the hallway, but my door was never closed. Such a requirement would have felt intrusive and shameful if my emotions were not out on strike. It was almost like the dehumanization of that experience was meant to be punishment for what I had done. But as it was, I'm not even sure I knew then what was happening. A constant theme then. If I knew, I sure didn't care. I never chose to shower. My hair stayed matted and tangled. One of those depression things. Loss of interest in personal hygiene. But whenever I was in the bathroom, my sitter came along and stood in that doorway too. Not the closed doorway, the open doorway. If I was forced to shower, once clean and regowned, I slumped back onto my bed and returned to my S position, facing the wall, as close to it as I could get without touching it. To block out the pain, to block out the dark world. The sitter also resumed her position in my doorway. I don't remember how often those interruptions occurred. That's a theme in my life now, not remembering. There's a lot that I don't remember. I don't even know how much is missing. Perhaps that's a gift. As I alluded to at the beginning of that piece and described earlier, severe depression affected my memory. There's a great deal that I do not remember from 2007 to 2018. 11 years of my life are just recorded in a small smattering of glimpses and journal entries. In some ways, that is depressing in itself. And as I also said, in some ways, it's a blessing. I don't remember the second of my 4 hospitalizations at all. My therapist and I actually had a debate about it once. We were speaking of a particular treatment episode, and I said it was in the fall of 2015. She said it was in the spring. I was certain that it had to be in the fall. In my memory, I was admitted to a different hospital in the spring of 2015, and not again until the second hospital in the fall of 2015, almost a year and a half later. My therapist eventually provided me with some proof and collaboration with my husband that I was also hospitalized in the spring of 2015, in between the 2 admissions that I did recall. At my request, they provided me with a significant amount of detail from that time. Even today, and with that factual information, I don't remember a single thing from that entire period. I only know because I was told by my husband and my therapist that the psych wards in which I stayed were locked. Entry or exit was only by being buzzed in or buzzed out. Anything brought into the wards was searched. Once I was allowed to wear street clothes, no shoelaces, no belts, no hoodie strings. I do remember that further into my recovery, when I was eventually allowed and eventually cared, I had my Kindle. But it was stored in a locked cabinet with any devices any of the other patients had. When the devices came out for use, the charging cords were still kept behind lock and key. There were no scissors anywhere on the unit, and even pointy pens and pencils were only given out in supervised situations and collected when they were no longer used. Every hospital that treats affective disorders like depression has their own unique program for helping those patients, though most of them include some common elements. Common are things like changes in or the introduction of medication, sessions of group therapy and individual therapy, and sometimes other things like classes or some kind of occupational therapy. At one hospital, occupational therapy for me involved things that might have helped us look forward to our lives after discharge and encouraged us to reignite basic functional skills. I remember once making chocolate chip cookies with a group. Of course, there were no knives involved, no electric beaters with power cords, and none of the patients were allowed to go near the oven. My first hospital stay was at a different location than the other 3. Occupational therapy there was a bit different. There was a craft area in the common room. And there were a whole variety of different activities to choose from. You were required to select one of those to work on at different times during the day. The craft area was supervised at all times. There, we were allowed to use scissors, blunt-bladed, preschool or kindergarten style, and they were allowed only under direct supervision. During that admission, I chose to make a mosaic with little ceramic tiles. It still exists. I don't like that mosaic. It reminds me of a time that I would rather forget, but my daughter loves it, and she keeps it on display in her home. I once asked her why. She told me it reminded her of my struggle to get better, and how strong I had to be to succeed at it. She said it also reminds her how lucky she feels that I'm still here in her life. How did I react to my hospitalizations? At the time, They made me angry and resentful. I felt that I'd been forced to admit myself, and I felt unable to convince anyone that I could leave. I felt like they were a waste of time because I was miserable and I kept relapsing afterwards. Now, with some distance, I recognize how critical those hospital stays were. I'm also grateful for the care and compassion I received from some of the staff members, some of whom almost became friends of a sort from my lengthy stays with them. One of the treatments I received for my depression is called ECT, or electroconvulsive therapy. You might have heard of it identified as shock therapy. Some of us saw an example of it in a movie last night. The mention of ECT might be alarming, but thankfully, they've improved dramatically both the safety of the experience and the way that the patient goes through the experience. ECT today is a procedure done under general anesthesia in which small electrical currents are passed through the brain. They're done intentionally to trigger a brief grand mal seizure. In addition to anesthesia, the patient is given a muscle relaxant so that the body only makes small, localized twitches. It doesn't thrash around, as is common during large seizures, or as people might remember from old versions of the treatment. ECT is often identified as the treatment of last resort. It is an attempt to cause changes in the brain chemistry. It is harsh, and it is treatment with significant risks and side effects. Some of the side effects are short-term and include things like not remembering what happened a short time before or after the procedure, significant headache or muscle loss, or muscle aches rather, nausea and vomiting, sleepiness and fatigue. Things that largely make sense when you consider what happens to the patient during that treatment. Experienced less frequently are long-term side effects. These arise from a, quote, excessive number of treatments. Excessive doesn't necessarily refer to unnecessary treatments, just a number, 20 or more. I had 66. The changes induced by ECT can quickly reverse the symptoms of certain mental health conditions, including depression. It's most often used with patients like me who've not been responsive to other forms of treatment, including a vast array of medications, and patients who are currently at grave risk of hurting themselves or ending their life. I did not experience all of my ECT treatments in one big sequence. I had ECT administered during all but my first hospitalization. I also received ECT as an outpatient. It had become evident that even though ECT could help improve my mental health for a period of time, inevitably, my depression turned more severe again. So I received maintenance treatment, once a month usually, and when my depression intensified, at more frequent intervals, sometimes up to 3 times a week. But after a significant number of treatments, well into the excessive count, I began to suffer from serious long-term side effects. At first, I didn't realize they were connected to ECT. But after 3.5 years of treatments and intensifying side effects, I did more research, and I discovered that what I was experiencing were definitely the result of the vast number of ECTs that I had had. At that point, I decided to cease ECT, regardless of the state of my depression. Living with the side effects had become too debilitating, and I couldn't risk making them worse. The effects of my depression and the treatment that I endured are with me permanently now on my daily journey. They are now a firmly woven part of the fabric of my life. I have lost some long-term memories, random, from throughout my life. We've all had those moments where we can't remember a word or maybe the details of an experience. They feel like they're on the tip of our tongue. We feel it's almost a physical sensation because our brain is firing effectively and the information is in there. We just have to figure out the right path to get to it. I have those too. But the memories I've lost because of ECT don't feel that way. And they're a lot more than words. They are black holes in my brain, like my second hospitalization, as I described before. I remember only one little snippet from our son's college graduation in 2015. I once asked my husband if our daughter had been able to attend the graduation. He told me that she had. She also shared a hotel bed with me. I also found out that there had been an anniversary party for my parents' 50th. Apparently, I gave the toast. Sarah has revealed pictures of me at the party, and I found the toast document on my computer. But I still don't remember any of it. To me, it never happened. I also process information more slowly and struggle to learn new things. Sometimes I read an article or watch a TV show, but I often don't remember what I saw. I'm working to try focusing on enjoying the experience, enjoying the time, rather than building anger about what my brain is not doing the way it once did. It takes me about 3 to 4 times longer than before to finish a book. If the name of a book gets mentioned, I might recognize it, but usually I have no idea if I've read it or not. And often, I don't remember what it was about. A couple of months ago, I discovered I had 2 copies of the same book, The Paris Architect, and I've read them both. I wonder if I had the same thoughts both times. I couldn't tell you what the story is about. I can't add fast enough to be a good scorekeeper when we play games, or to quickly figure a tip on a restaurant check. It's basic math. I can do it, just more slowly than before. Tonight, I might play cribbage with my dad. We've spent decades sharing the joy over that wooden board and the playing cards. But first, I will ask him to review the rules so I can write them down. And then I'll probably refer to them during every turn. Learning new things involves taking information into our working memory and transferring it to short-term memory. That's how you remember the name of someone that you just met several minutes ago. Then those memories transfer to long-term memory. And that allows you to remember that person the next day, a week, or even a year later. My brain no longer does those things very readily. If I've met you before and I don't remember you or your name, please understand it's not that I didn't care enough to pay attention. When I began my story, I mentioned some of the things I used to love to do. Doing them well was my passion. Now, they sometimes present different obstacles or become too painful for me to face. I can't just work harder to understand, or work faster, or remember. So I'm ambivalent now about ECT. I don't like what happened to me because of it, but it saved my life. I think it has its place. I might have missed my son's transition from being a flight student in college to piloting big jets for a national airline. I might have missed my daughter's wedding last fall, and my nephew's wedding too. Thankfully, I can now get a less invasive treatment when I need intervention because my medications aren't doing enough to control my depression. Oh, sorry. Is that better? I'll repeat that intro. Thankfully, I now get a less invasive treatment when I need intervention because my medications aren't doing enough. Called TMS, it is transmagnetic stimulation, and it sends magnetic pulses through my brain instead of electricity. It's easy, it involves no side effects. I drive myself to my appointments and home again, or off to another adventure. I don't spend a whole day at the hospital, and it's a much simpler way to treat my depression. But it might not be successful if my depression becomes too severe again. Still, it's good for preventing the onset from becoming more serious, and in that way, it's working well for me. I continue my therapy sessions almost as consistently as I take my medications. My psychotherapist and I have walked a long journey together, and I'm very fortunate to have her in my corner. Finding a therapist with whom you connect can be a challenge, but it's well worth it, especially when you're dealing with a serious issue or mental illness. When I had no hope of ever feeling better, my therapist would tell me she held the hope. 9 years later, I still work with her 4 hours a week, and I'm continuing to heal and grow with her help. Depression can have different comorbidities. Addiction is one, for example, and I'm grateful that that has not been an issue for me. Generalized anxiety disorder is another, and that I do have. It's his own diagnosis, and as the name describes, it is not in response to a particular thing. It's not as if flying to visit my family or giving a presentation makes me anxious. It's a generalized but intense feeling of unease. My anxiety has not gone into remission like my depression, and it may never do that. Thankfully, I now have a service dog, Bo, who would ordinarily be here with me tonight. But he's doing a board and train with our service trainer this week. We do those periodically so he can have a span of intensive training, reminding him about all the things he needs to do. Bo is trained to perform specific service skills that can help relieve my anxiety and can also help to alleviate some of my depression symptoms. Because he performs specific skills that help remediate my disability, he's a fully certified service dog and generally accompanies me everywhere I go. My husband wasn't all that thrilled about getting another dog, as our previous one was becoming a senior. But he recognizes that Bo has helped me in some pretty amazing ways. Mental illness, including depression and anxiety, are best handled as a team sport. And I'm lucky to have an incredibly strong lineup of players on my team. I'm blessed beyond description to have a supportive and dedicated husband. He's probably watching in Maryland tonight. He was a tireless assistant. His attempts to strengthen my tenuous grasp on a life with which I had all but lost contact with and barely remembered. Thank you for all of that, Craig. I don't know how he and I, would be navigating this journey without my incredible therapist. She never turned her back because the clock said time was up, when my time was truly running out. She's held the hope for long periods of time, and she's coaching me to carry it again myself. Sarah and I live 800 miles apart, but along with Craig, she has always been one of my strongest lifelines. Sarah never claimed to know my journey or try to downplay it. She called me even when I couldn't say much in response. She accepted my tears. When I started to recover and expressed interest in attending a particular concert, Sarah crossed all 800 miles to go with me and ensure I took that positive step in my recovery. I don't mean to embarrass Sarah or make her sound like a saint, because she's not. But I want people to recognize the crucial roles that someone can play, even from a distance, in the positive outcomes of a mental health crisis for others. You don't have to be the one. You don't have to do it all. Sometimes, only the small things get through. But sometimes, they have grand importance. Sometimes, they are just enough. I've been free from my depression now since October 2021. Almost a year and a half. The longest I've been in remission since my depression started. Even in recovery or remission, it can be hard to face the knowledge that recurrence is a possibility. It is an intense, specific anxiety. I watch over my shoulder every day, worried that it might reappear. This December, during the darkest days leading up to the winter solstice, I felt down, and I wanted to do nothing but sit on the couch with Craig or with Bo. After a few days, I wondered if I was just feeling down because of the dark season, or maybe due to the approach of the first anniversary of my mother's death. Or was I becoming depressed? When we were planning my daughter's wedding last summer, for a couple of weeks, I felt more overwhelmed than overjoyed. Perhaps that's a normal thing for the mother of the bride. But every day, I worried a little more and thought, please, don't let me be unfeeling during the wedding. Please let me experience that joy and remember this special time. And I'm happy to say that this time, I celebrated every moment, and I remember it too. So, how have I responded to all of this on my journey with mental health and its repercussions? I've put a lot of coping mechanisms in place, and I'm learning ways to compensate for and accept my new challenges. I take 3 antidepressants every day, and sometimes 2 anti-anxiety meds. I go to therapy. That's a big one for me. Sometimes I find ways to alter how I do things. Before all of this happened, I could have written an outline with some notes for this presentation. Instead, I'm referring to full text tonight. I also make choices. Sometimes I can accept that a task might be harder or take longer, but sometimes I avoid things that will only frustrate or upset me. Sometimes I'm just downright angry, but I have to allow that to some degree. Sometimes I grieve. I grieve the part of my identity I lost. Sometimes I do look over my shoulder and worry about recurrence. Sometimes I'm even able to celebrate. I celebrate that today is another good day, free of depression. I celebrate the relationships that I have, the people I care about and who care about me. I focus on opportunities and enjoying things and being thankful for all that I have and all I can do. I cherish participating and hopefully remembering things like family celebrations and game nights with my husband and the kids over the internet. I have Bo helping me with both my depression and my anxiety. I always get a lift when he comes over and nuzzles me because he senses my emotions are low or my anxiety is high. When I acknowledge him, we put his trained skills into motion, skills that he and I worked very hard together to put in place. I also write. I write poems, often related to the feelings and experiences I've shared tonight. As I've done for much of my life, I continue to journal. I'm also working on a memoir about my life and about my journey of mental health. I'm also working on a memoir. And this memoir is focused on this challenging time in my life. It allows me a forum to keep processing and healing. It also affords me hope that maybe my experience can help someone else navigating or trying to understand such a journey. This is a really heavy topic. For me, life despite depression has so many positives, before and now. Even if I'm nervous about the what ifs, I'm cautiously hopeful about my future, and I'm working on accepting Ellen version 2.0. I'm at least grateful that I'm here to try right now. And right now, it's pretty darn good. I'd like to leave you with one last eloquent message of hope. It starts with some words of darkness, kind of similar to mine. But I think it takes us to a good place by the end. And this one isn't mine. This was written by someone very dear to me, and she gave me permission to share it. We are accustomed to a world where absolutes are rare. We wade in murky waters of partial truths. We embrace friends that are neither all good nor all bad. And we absorb that there are shades within spectrums. We are unprepared for depression. I love you, and thus offer this story in case you find yourself in the cave where I once dwelled. The cave of depression is stunning in its absoluteness. There are no shadows because there is no light. The darkness is so dense that it has a physical presence. Like light, all hope and possibility are gone. Other well-intentioned people may offer suggestions of things that you should do, but they do not know the Herculean effort of unfurling from a fetal position. Sometimes success is going through the motions for another day. Though I clench your hand and kiss your brow, you cannot feel love and self-worth in this cave. I offer no platitudes about depression. I have, however, survived. I can tell you this tale and hope that you and others may find solace in the possibility of survival. Survival and the delights that follow. That's right. I said delights. First, you might see shadows. One day, it's not so arduous to get out of bed. Hope and possibility reappear. Going through the motions for another day has allowed you to see truths that the cave has kept hidden. You are lovable, and you're not alone. Once you are out of the cave, there is work to be done. The good news is that you have a superpower. You know that you can survive total darkness. This makes you fearless and drives you forward. You learn that isolation was a myth. You tell your stories and thus connect with others. Connection becomes your raison d'etre. You listen with your heart, soft and open. You offer others the grace of being heard and seen. Dark days may come again, but you know that they will pass. Your previous experience kindles hope, patience, and perseverance. The memory of the darkness gives you perspective. You don't overlook everyday wonders. You delight again and again in love, connections, and the vastness of your possibilities. Your superpowers are without limit. You are the architect of your own life. Freed from the darkness, you sow light. If you have walked or are walking a pathway that seems similar to mine, even a little bit, know that you're not alone and you can get help. Even if you don't believe there is enough help or the right kind of help for you, reach out, tell someone, share with them how you're feeling. And as Sarah said, if anyone here is in need of assistance now, please tell her before you leave, or any one of us. Sarah will try to get you the help that you need to connect with an appropriate resource and stay with you while we can get them here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen, for the courage to be vulnerable and share your story so that the rest of us can perhaps understand better and help others. Ellen is very open to questions. If there's something that you ask that she's not comfortable answering, she will honestly tell you, but she is very open to just about anything. So, does anyone have any questions? And we're using the mic so that the people online can hear the conversation.
I'm curious about how it was going through the grieving process of your mom passing away, and where you were in remission at that time.
Yes, I was in remission at that time. And to be honest with you, I'm very grateful that I got to go through the grieving process. No matter where I had been, she would still be gone. And so I feel very fortunate that I got to spend time with her at the end and have those connections and say the things we wanted to say and just be together. I'm really grateful that I got to go through that process with my family and have those experiences to hold.
Hi, I'm Lori. My question is, I've had a journey, not as in-depth as yours, but I had to chuckle with the no shoelaces and had to have my kids cut my ties off my sweatpants because I needed them there and things like that. And every time I go to therapy, I feel like my depression is much better. I understand the changing of the medications and give it 4 weeks, give it 4 weeks. Sometimes that 4 weeks is the longest 4 weeks of your life because you don't know if it's going to work. And that is so hard. But I do feel I'm in a much better place, but it was very interesting when you said the anxiety part of it. Trying to get a grip on that. How do you do it? That is my thing that I'm still trying so hard to control, and I'm tired of everybody telling me medication, but that's the hardest part, I think, now that I got the depression under control. I believe I do.
Thank you for sharing with us some of your journey too, Lori. And I very much understand what you've described. It is a journey. It doesn't always have an absolute end. It keeps going. Sometimes it goes well, and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes we have to be patient. We have to try and have hope, but it's still rough. And I think for me, having that connection with my therapist, the connections with my family, and the opportunity to keep experiencing those things and working through those things and finding the times that are good to hang on to are what keep me going. But you're absolutely right. It is a journey. You know, medications aren't simple. They have side effects. They alter the way we feel. And that doesn't just mean altering it for the positive. Sometimes there are negative things that come along with it. Same is true for the the ECT treatments that I described. But I think that we do have to just keep trying and keep reaching. And hopefully for you, you'll get to a point where it feels more comfortable, where you sort of have the pieces in place the way you need them. But I do think that there is, for many of us, that looking over the shoulder piece. And I don't know how to tell you to get past that. I'm not sure that we do. I think that we often find a place that we are the most comfortable in and feel like it's at least held in a place that we can survive having it there. But you're not alone on the journey.
Anyone else? Well, thank you all for coming this evening. It's a tough topic. It's a topic that I think really needs to be spoken about openly. And I applaud my sister for not only surviving her journey, but having the vulnerability to share with us and help us learn and grow through her experience. Ellen will be available if anyone wants to come and ask her a question on one-on-one. Sometimes the group setting is daunting. And also the photo and text exhibit is open in the back library if you want to spend some time in there. Thank you again, and good night to all of you online.